Hey everybody, this is Eric. I'm here with a contest response for Andy's Vinyl Den. So his contest is for a 500 subs contest, and he wants people to tell a story about times they went to shows or something music related that he will then use in a comic book. Well, I have a lot of stories about going to shows because I went to a lot of shows, especially back in the 90s and early 2000s. But what I figured I'd do is I'd talk about a show, more like an incident, not bad. Something happened at a show I'm going to call a misconnection. And it happened in 2002, November-ish, in Minneapolis, the 400 bar, and I was seeing this band, the Soundtrack of Our Lives. If you're not familiar with Soundtrack of Our Lives, they were part of that high-energy rock scene from Sweden and Australia and the U.S., during the late 90s, early 2000s. They have a history that goes back to the 80s with a band called, if I can remember the name, Union Carbide Productions. Very Stooges influenced, very punk rock, but still kind of accessible and expansive. I like to describe them this way, that if Turbo Negro was the Rolling Stones and the Helicopters are the Beatles, that Soundtrack of Our Lives is the Kinks of that scene. Great band, great album, really great accessible stuff. Saw them live multiple times. Saw them as a student in Sweden. And then when I moved to Minneapolis in November of 2002, they were playing that first week that I was there looking for a job and a place to live. I went with my brother. He and I had moved there together. We were living in a hotel looking for apartments. And we saw the Soundtrack was playing the 400 bar with the Caselt Salsa Experience and maybe the Caesars. I totally forget the name of the other band. But we went to the show, and we were talking to the merch people because the Caselt Salsa Experience, which is a Norwegian band, was on a label that was owned by a guy that was friends of a band that he used to know, that we were friends with. And eventually, as the night wore on, it got closer and closer time for Soundtrack to play. We were hanging out by the front of the stage, and at some point before their set, this young woman walks up to me, and she says, "What are you guys, band security?" We started talking to her, and it was getting fairly friendly, and just, it was just one of the first times in my life that an attractive young woman had approached me and obviously kind of wanted to talk to me. My brother was there. She didn't really talk to him much. So we talked for quite a while, and then the show started. And we were watching the show, and at some point she says, "Can you get me a beer?" And I'm like, "Oh, come on, we're watching the show here." Which is probably where I lost the whole plot. I don't have anybody in my life that was supposed to go, "Idiot, go get the beer." At any rate, so we watched the rest of the show, chatted a little bit, I gave her my email address. We left, and I never heard from her again. Never saw her again. I chalked it up to first week in Minneapolis, a billion things going on. Missed connection. That happened more than once at shows in Minneapolis to various degrees, where I would meet a young woman and we would talk for a while and chat and be very friendly and say goodbye and never see them again. And that first one really stands out in my mind. Now, the reason I'm telling this story is partially because I know that that's actually kind of a fairly straightforward story for Andy to draw or animate, or whatever you want to call it, for his comic project. I've actually written some comics, nothing major. The record label I used to run, my brother and I did comics with our first couple of 7-inch records, where I wrote them and our friend Big Tony drew them. So at any rate, that is my misconnection #1 story from Minneapolis. I won't even go into the time that I was at the show for the Super Suckers, and some girl just handed me her beer. And at any rate, Soundtrack of Our Lives, check them out. Andy, dude, I love your channel. I dig your stuff. So go check out Andy's channel. I'll leave a link below. Everybody be good, and I'll catch you next time.